if you can see me, if you would type into the chat box, let us know where you're from, what your role is. I'd love to hear from you and just know a little bit about what brought you to today's webinar. Today, we're really going to focus on what should you expect from your ISA. So a very common question. In fact, I got this in my email inbox about 45 minutes ago saying, I have a team of ISAs. What should I expect if they're calling this lead source versus that lead source? Because I want to make sure I'm not being unreasonable. And I love that question. So we're going to cover that today. Grab notes because I'm going to give you a lot of metrics, a lot of percentages to write down. And this is recorded. So if you're not catching it all, if I'm moving too fast, first let me know, but also you can come back and watch the webinar. Before we do, for those of you that don't know me, I think most of you probably do through Facebook and other things, but my name's Anna and I've been coaching, well, first I've been an inside sales agent since 2006, and I've been coaching inside sales agents within the industry of real estate and outside the industry of real estate since 2008. So I've learned a lot of what's normal, what's not normal, what does a typical day look like? So let me go ahead and give you some overall benchmarks, and then we're going to dive in a little deeper into what exactly does it look like if they are, only calling a certain lead source versus a different lead source. So give me 1 second. It just dawned on me. I have some of this on a slide. So let me pull that up for you real fast. While I do that, if you would type in what you want to know from today's webinar as well, and that way I can catch any of that at the end. Okay, 1 second here. And Hannah, I think I'm getting some feedback. I'm not sure if you're muted or unmuted. Okay.
I'm unmuted, thank you.
There you go. I was like, I think it might, maybe it's me. I don't know. Okay, so let's talk about what to expect from your ISA. And this is going to be for all lead sources combined. So just want to give you a couple different perspectives here. And let me go ahead and share screen. Hopefully you all can see this. Okay, so before we dive too deep into this, let me take this back down so you can see me. Please know when I say the metrics I'm about to share, it's for all lead sources. So one of my pet peeves, and it is totally pet peeve, you'll see my face probably get red when I talk about it, is when someone goes to a conference and they hear someone on stage say, well, my ISA sets 40 appointments a month. And that's all that we really hear. And then we go back and expect 40 appointments a month from our ISA, yet there's a lot we don't know. So here's some questions I want you guys to just write down to ask people when they're talking about my ISA does this or my ISA does that. Here's some really good clarifying questions to ask to know, is it reasonable for me to expect that from my ISA? Or if you are the ISA, is it reasonable to expect from yourself? I see some of you in here are the ISA, which is awesome. I'm glad you're here. So a couple clarifying questions you want to ask people is, one, what lead sources are you calling? What lead sources are you calling? Two, how many leads per month are you getting coming into you? So what are your best lead sources and how are you getting leads? How many leads are you getting? And then the third question I would want to know is, how do you define an appointment? So when you say you're setting an appointment, how do you define that? Now, when I was a new ISA, and this makes me laugh, hopefully it'll make you laugh. I was super involved in networking events and all this. And I met an ISA who said she was setting 20 appointments a week. And I was averaging between 7 and 10 when I was new. So I thought, okay, if this chick is setting 20 a week, I want to call her and find out what she's doing because I need to learn from that. Well, I called her. And as I talked to her, what I learned is she defined an appointment, what I would call a nurture. So in other words, for me, the way I define an appointment is I've pre-qualified them. I've asked them about 20 questions about the house they want to buy or sell. I know their timeline. I know their motivation. I know whether or not they're working with an agent. Like, I've asked them all the questions. And then we've set a time for them to meet with an agent to interview them about hiring them to buy or sell a house. This person who was setting 20 a week was really finding, oh, you're interested? Let me get you to an agent and they'll have a phone conversation with you from there. So her definition and my definition of appointment were totally different from each other. So when you hear people talking about metrics, especially if you're at a conference or even just sitting around a dinner table at hopefully in-person events that we'll get back to eventually, Always ask, how many leads are you getting per month? What lead sources are you calling? And how do you define an appointment? That's going to be really, really important. Okay, so let's jump in, and then after we do this, I'll address some of the questions in the box. So what we want to do is track, really dial to contact. By the way, I teach this in the How to Tryer. Oh, I can't talk. I've been coaching all day. I'm getting all tongue-tied, guys. How to hire, train, and retain inside sales agents, which we're launching a week from today. Actually, this time next week, we'll be teaching that 5-week course. This is actually one slide out of that slide deck of like 60 slides. So here's one of them. But you're going to track dial to contact. And the reason you're tracking this is I want to know if the list I'm calling is a good list or if it's a good time of day. What I mean by this is I've been in ISA and thought, man, this list is crappy. No one's picking up today. And I feel like surely this list is just not a great list. Maybe I need to call someone else today. And then I realized I've had a 25% pickup rate. So what that means is actually a lot of people are picking up the phone because 12% or higher is considered good. So all that this means is if you're dialing 100 people, you should have at least 12% pickup. If it's less than 12%, check maybe it's the time of day. Maybe you're calling Friday night at 7, probably not going to be a great pickup time. But if you're calling and you've called it a couple times and every time you call it, it's below 12%, I would actually say that may not be a list to continue calling unless you have a strong reason, meaning maybe it's a target neighborhood that your team really wants to dominate. Maybe that would be a reason. So 12% or higher dial to contact. Now contact to set, and remember, this is across all lead sources. So this could be inbound, outbound, sign calls, internet leads, maybe calling some FSBOs for sale by owners. Contact to set is 5%. 5%. And that would be 1 out of 20. So talk to 20 people, set 1 appointment. Now, what I noticed in the beginning of COVID, which we're well beyond the beginning of COVID at this point, right? But just as an example, it went to 2.5% across the board. So as I was coaching ISAs, I found super talented ISAs who normally were at 5%, and they were needing to call 40 people to set 1 versus 20 people to set 1. And that was just because the market had shifted. So you do want to pay attention to the market, yet generally 5% is normal. Now, once you set that appointment, it doesn't really matter what market you're in because the setting it is going to depend a bit on the market and also your skill, right? However, once you set it, it doesn't really matter what the market is. You've got an agreement that this person is going to show up, and that should be 70% or higher. 70% or higher, okay? Now, there's a lot of reasons why it might not be 70% that we can fix. For example, if you set it more than 48 hours out, it usually will no show. So and I found that just through my own experience. So if you're setting appointments and they're 3 days out, high chance of a no-show. So there's some things you can do. We're not going to talk about that today. It's not the purpose of today's webinar, but just know 70% is normal for a trained ISA or agent. Once they hold or once they actually meet with the agent, 80% signed, 80% signed. And I saw a question, do Zoom appointments count? And I would say absolutely right now. An appointment in my mind, the way I'm referring to it today is this person knows that they're meeting with the agent to talk to them about interviewing and hiring. So if the person knows, whether it's on Zoom, whether it's in person, hey, let's have you meet with Jacob. You guys are going to interview each other. You're going to go back over pricing and motivation. And if everything looks good, we'll have you sign paperwork to move forward. That would be an appointment, whether it's on Zoom or in person, okay? Once they actually meet, it should be 80%. Now, I would say this one right here, the agent and the ISA is responsible for that. What I mean by that is if I, as the ISA, am setting up an appointment that's not pre-qualified, or maybe I didn't mention that they might sign something, or maybe I didn't build up the agent at all, I'm partially responsible for them not signing, right? Now, if I do everything right and the agent shows up to that appointment unprepared, unscripted, well, then that's them, right? And so this one is really, it's both of us, right? We both need to show up at our strong point. We need to show up with our A game. We should be able to see an 80% signed. Now, I will tell you, with a lot of the scripts and dialogues that we teach in the coaching program, I see teams get up to 90 to 95. My team was at 90% seller, 95% buyer, month after month after month after month. Another team that we coached that I watched really closely, they were also at 90 to 95% signing. So 80 is very reasonable, regardless of the lead source. Okay. Now, once they've signed or hired the team, 80% close. That's normal. The agent's responsible for that, yet as the ISA, they want to track it because it's my job to bring in closings ultimately, right? So even though I'm not the one getting them under contract, I do need to know how many appointments do I need to set in order to get a closing, okay? So if we scale it out big picture, whoops, let's go back over here. Just write this down. It's not on the slide, but big picture. If you take all of these combined, contact, set, held, signed, closed, it usually takes 75 contacts in order to get one closing. 75 contacts in order to get one closing. At the height of COVID, so when everything first started and people were nervous, it went to 150 contacts to get a closing. So again, you just have to know your metrics. These are pretty common. You just have to watch if we're in an extreme market, okay? All right, so this is kind of like the general put everything together typical metric. It does usually take 3 to 6 months for an ISA to get up to these standards. People in our coaching program, we have Mastering Inside Sales, which starts May 12th. Yeah, May the 12th, it's a Wednesday. So a couple, what's that, like 6 weeks from now? People in that program are seeing these conversion ratios. I had an ISA tell me recently that she increased by 10 held, not set, 10 held appointments per month on average as a result of the program. 10 extra people showing up because of the training. So these are definitely reasonable, doable metrics once a person is trained. Now, if they don't have training, this would not be what you can expect. So this is coming from tracking metrics of trained ISAs that have been through the coaching program. If you could put it in the chat box, Hannah, I think you're running the chat box for us, where to find that Mastering Inside Sales program. But these are pretty typical. So now let's break it down a little bit more. In fact, let me put this back up real quick. And I will get to questions here in just a minute. Let me finish sharing some of these metrics and then we'll go to questions. Once you set an appointment, the rest of these should hold, right? So set to held, no matter where the appointment came from, once you set it, it should be at 70% or higher held, meaning they showed up. Once they show up or hold, 80% should sign. And then once they sign, 80% should close. So as far as what metrics are affected by which lead source you're using, it's really just this contact to set. Just this one right here. So let's talk through those real quick. And this is just coming from research. Get ready to write these down. I had someone ask, can we get your slides? And no, you cannot. Thank you for the question. These are actually copyrighted slides straight out of the How to Hire, Train, and Retain ISAs class. So just take really good notes, really good notes. Now in the class, you get a workbook, and in the workbook, you'll get all of this information, but the slides are copyrighted, okay? But great question. So let me just break it down for you by a couple different lead sources. So for example, if someone is circle prospecting, and maybe that's all that they do. And circle prospecting is where I say, I'm going to pick a neighborhood and I'm just going to call the owners in that neighborhood looking for a buyer or looking for a seller. They haven't necessarily raised their hand. I don't know for sure that anyone there wants to move, but I'm going to target a neighborhood and call them looking for someone. A lot of people are doing that right now, looking for sellers, because sellers are a little hard to come by if you hadn't noticed. So what we know is it usually takes 20 conversations to get one nurture. And a nurture would be someone who says, I'm interested, not right now, yet probably in the next 12 months. And yes, you can stay in touch with me. So 20 contacts will usually get you a nurture, and around 100 contacts will get you a set appointment. So that's why I said, if you see someone on stage somewhere saying, oh yeah, I set 20 appointments a week or 40 appointments a month, you got to find out what lead sources are you calling. You know, if they're calling a variety and then a different ISA is only doing circle prospecting, which by the way, will build the business. It just takes longer. I would not expect someone only circle prospecting to set 40 quality good appointments a month versus someone who might be doing, FISBO, sign calls, internet leads, and database, right? They're just two different pools of leads. So just know circle prospecting, usually 20 contacts will earn you someone to add to the database. And then about 100 contacts will get you an appointment of someone who says, wow, I can't believe you called me today. I actually do want to move. And I just told my wife we needed to find a realtor. How crazy that you called me. And that'll take about 100 conversations. What we find for sign calls, so when someone calls about the sign in the yard, usually 10 conversations will lead to one appointment, 10 to 1. If you have an internet lead where it's some sort of forced registration, regardless of the website, if it is a forced registration, meaning, submit your information to see more pictures, things like that, usually 3% will convert. So get 100 leads, usually 3% of those will convert right away. So obviously how many you set will depend on how many leads you have coming in. But say you get 100 internet leads this week and next, I would expect 3 appointments out of that, 3 appointments, okay? Let's see, home valuations. I'm just thinking through the list here. If you have certain ones you're wondering, type them in, and if I know, I will tell you. Home valuations, which is someone who says, I'm curious the price of my home, and they submit that info, just, hey, I want a comp, give me some comps on my house. Usually for those, we find that 1 out of 10 turn into a nurture, and it takes about 100 of them to get a closing, okay? So home valuations you need more of them to actually get a closing than you would like a buyer internet lead, okay? Let's see, who else? I'll go ahead and tell you, although we don't have a lot of these right now, but expireds, which we will get them back. I don't know when it will happen, but expireds will come back. I'm actually really excited about it. Expireds are one of my favorite lead sources to call. We usually find 1 out of 10 will set an appointment with you. And for sale by owners, which there are quite a few for sale by owners right now because of the market, they feel like they can do it on their own. We find 1 out of 10 of those will also set first-time conversation, okay? Direct mailers, I actually don't have a number on that. That's not one I do. I know we used to farm a neighborhood using direct mailers, and in that we would invite them to go online and request a home valuation, and that's where we would get that, 100 to get one. But it would be, they got the mailer and then they took an extra step to go online and submit some info. From that point, it was about 100 to get one. So hopefully that answers that for you. Okay, internet leads to an appointment. It's 3% will turn into an appointment, usually right away. Now, I've heard 3 to 6%, 3 to 6. 3 is like the low end. 6 would be a well-scripted person. And I'm going to say this, and I say it in love. I know a lot of you watching this are the ISA, or maybe you're leading the ISA. What I have found, and I've done this long enough that I feel like I can say this and it's accurate because I've had so much experience at this point. Often I will have someone new come into coaching or into the training program, and they'll say, this lead source, it's just terrible. It's not working for me. Well, then we'll listen to the scripts, or we'll, do some recorded calls, and it's like, oh, it's the scripts. They'll change and start using the appropriate language patterns, and now they're at that 3 to 6%. 3 to 6%. So if you get 100 internet leads today, 3 of them will turn into an appointment today, or 6, 3 to 6. Okay. I don't usually hear more than 6 because a lot of internet leads, and I was this way, but you start looking online a little while before you're ready because you want to get to know the market, what's out there, what's possible. And then over time, more of those will convert. So know that with internet leads, it's the long game. Make sure you stay in touch with them. And over time, more of those will convert. So part of where this is coming from, guys, is the How to Hire, Train, and Retain class. Something we won't talk about today because of time, but also it's baked into that program, which is launching next week. This time next week, we'll be teaching that class. Is we talk about how do you know you're getting ROI on the position. So as an ISA, I wanted to know, is Haro getting his money's worth out of me, right? Am I providing enough value that my position makes sense to have? Then when you start leading ISAs, you also want to be aware, like, how many closings does this person need to bring me in order for their position to make sense? And I can say that as an ISA, we really are like a lead source. I am a human lead source. So if a team is paying, X amount of dollars for Boomtown leads or Facebook ads, we would expect a certain amount of dollars in return for that to make sense. And that's how I viewed my salary and also the commission I earned. I earned this much this month. How much value did I bring the team? Right. And so we talk about that in the program. There's a lot of things in there. So you can go, it's in the chat box, and I'll share it on screen real quick. Let me show you where to find this class, and then I'll go to the Q&A. But if you go to annascoaching.com, and these are MAPS programs. If you're familiar with MAPS, if you're not, that's totally fine. But we go to annascoaching.com just because it's easy to find the class. And when you go to annascoaching.com, this little box will pop up. How to hire, train, and retain an ISA. The next class is next week. I can't believe it's April. Oh my gosh. April 8th. So if you click on learn more, that'll take you to the Rainmaker program. All classes are recorded and it's $199. And we don't only talk about metrics. This was one slide out of about 60. Okay, so we go over a lot of information in the class. It's 5 hours total. And the first hour and a half are really focused on hiring. And then the rest of the class is how to track, what to track, how to keep talented ISAs. I hear a lot of people say, or it's actually changing. I used to hear a lot more people say, it's like a revolving door. I hire an ISA and then it doesn't work out. Thankfully, that's not happening as much anymore because people are getting it right. But in this class, we talk about how do you keep a talented ISA? What could you do that would cause them to leave, right? There's certain things that if a team did a certain way, I wouldn't work there. There's other things that would motivate me to never want to leave. So we talk about that stuff in the class. Culture, how to introduce them to your team. We talk about commission splits. There's a lot. Junior agent versus ISA model. Should they be virtual? Should they be local? We go over all that stuff. So this class came from years and years of questions that I got. And I finally thought this just should be a class because there's no way to answer these questions the best way through an email. So let's just create a class. So here's the information. Again, you just go to annascoaching.com. Let me show you one more thing, and then we'll jump into Q&A. So again, in just a second, that little box will pop up, and this is the class I'm talking about right here. However, if you close that, you will also see this class, May 12th. So we have the hiring class, retention class, April 8th. May the 12th, we have a class for the actual inside sales agent. So if you go back to those conversions that I shared with you, and I said, these are for a trained ISA. If they're not trained, I wouldn't expect these conversion ratios. In that class that starts May the 12th, we go over 19 language patterns, 4 trackers, all the things, okay? So that's there as well. Okay. Any questions? Let me scroll back up and catch some questions. If you have a question I haven't answered yet, go ahead and put it into the chat box. Awesome. Looks like we have people here from Tennessee, Texas. I just hired an ISA. I see the Moats team. Awesome. I've been to your office. So I don't know who's on the webinar today from the Moats team. If it's Bobby, of course, we know each other. But if you are the ISA, I have been in your office. It was a couple years ago. Let's see. So here's a good question. Is it good to put new agents as an ISA for 90 days? I think the practice is good. I would not call them an ISA, and here's why. A lot of ISAs, let me back up. I'm trying to think how to put this. We want the ISA position. We want to understand it is a career position. Like there are people that do that and they never leave. I know several ISAs that have done this 5+ years. They make 6 figures and think, why would I ever want to be an agent? I have a great schedule and I make 6 figures. I'm so happy. But what we find is if your team is structured that you start as an ISA and then you become an agent, think about what that sounds like, right? It sounds like the ISA position is one to move away from. It sounds like it's an entry-level position, and it's not. When we read the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, Gary actually talks about, he doesn't say the words inside sales, but he says lead generation is one of the things on the team that takes the most talent, whoever's doing it, right? So he actually talks about hiring someone to do lead gen for you is usually one of the later hires because it takes so much talent. So what we don't want to do is create this idea that the inside sales position, which is really lead gen, lead conversion, is a position to move away from. So to answer your question, I do think it's a great practice to have people start off the first 3 months focused on lead gen, lead conversion, because when that's what you do for 3 months, you get really, really, really good at building that skill, which is like the money-making skill. I would not, however, call it ISA. So what a lot of teams do, they'll have people start and they'll call it agent in training for the first 90 days. And that's kind of like your ramp up period. After 90 days, you either specialize as a listing agent, a buyer agent, or an inside sales agent. But we wouldn't want to use the verbiage, you start as an ISA and then become an agent, because it sounds like we're diminishing the. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know. I'm not sure. I just see Pinnacle Homes. I'm not sure your name, but if you have further questions about that, just let me know. Here's another question. Where can I find an ISA? Great question. So the short answer, and again, we spend the first hour and a half of that 5-hour class. It's 1 hour a week. So it's not 5 hours all at once. But the first class and half of the second class, we talk about where do you find them? What does the ad look like? How do you get people interested? How do you talk to people about this position? The short answer, however, is Sphere and past clients. That is the number one place as I talk with teams, where did you find your talent? It's usually Sphere or past clients. If you use an internet ad, Indeed.com seems to be the one that I hear works the best. Indeed.com. Just know it's kind of like circle prospecting. You're going to need a much larger volume of resumes to find one good person, just like with circle prospecting. And again, we'll talk a lot about that in the class that starts next week, but that's just a short answer for you. Okay. I see a question. I set many appointments, but buyers are discouraged and usually back out. Should I be more careful? And yes. Sometimes you set less, but you net more. So what I mean by that is if your quality goes up, sometimes your quantity goes down, but in the big picture, you actually earn more clients. Carly, there's so much I don't know about how you're setting appointments to really offer a lot of advice on that. But what I would say is in the Mastering Inside Sales class, which is this one right here, May 12th, on the very first day, I give a buyer info sheet and a seller info sheet with all the questions I recommend that you ask in order to set an appointment. And then throughout the class, I explain why, and we go really in depth into that. So that class will help you with that. Okay, let's see what other questions we have. Awesome. Looks like somebody registered for the class. Awesome. Dina, good to see you. Okay, somebody asked about the KPA. If you're here and not part of Keller Williams, you might be thinking KPA, what is that? It's a Keller Williams thing. And I would say the KPA is absolutely part of the process of hiring an ISA. It's not the whole picture, right? And that's why we do life story and a lot of questions. But the KPA, I have found that to be pretty accurate. Okay. Is there a way to be an ISA without having a license? That depends on your state. You got to check with your state. That's not a question I'm going to touch with the 10-foot pole. You got to check with your state. Rick, good to see you. Oh, Rick said, Mastering Inside Sales, total cost for 60,000 hours of experience training. I like your math on that. That's pretty smart. Yeah, Mastering Inside Sales class. Let's finish with this because we're right at time. This class, the how to hire and keep ISAs, that's one time, $199. Classes are recorded and you have them for 60 days, okay? Mastering Inside Sales, it's 6 months, $199 a month for 6 months. If you do not see ROI on that, then people are not showing up. I mean, this class, and I'm not saying this because I teach it, when we created that class, it was at the beginning of quarantine last year. And I thought through, okay, what are all the things that I wish I had known when I started? What are all the mistakes? What are all the wins? And basically brainstormed for days and made this massive list of all the things an ISA needs to know. And then I asked other ISAs that are really successful, what do you think ISAs should know? What should they track? What do you wish you knew on day one? And that's how it became a 6-month course. So we didn't sit down to write a 6-month course. We sat down to write a program that hit everything you need to know, and it became a 6-month course. So again, how to hire and keep ISAs, just again, go to annascoaching.com. You could also go to mapscoachanna.com. It all takes you to the same place. And here's where you can find the 2 classes. All right, guys, we are right at time. So we're going to head off. Thank you so much for the positive feedback, guys. And you guys will get a recording if you missed anything. So stay tuned for that. And hopefully I'll see you in class next week. I promise you it will be worth your time and save you a lot of headache in hiring an ISA. And also, if you've already hired, it will help you know how to keep ISAs on your team. Also, what might be a sign they're not the right fit. We'll talk about that too. All right, guys, I'll see you next week.